All right, so welcome to the community panel.
Woo!
So our focus today, or the question that we're attempting to answer, is how do you create and manage a community of supporters and make them feel like a part of your work? And so I'm just going to pose a question, and then maybe you can incorporate your own personal work and introduce yourselves in the context of the question. And so the first question is just that. How do you build or approach your own community building work? And we're going to go in order. We're going to put you in the hot seat. You're one.
Okay. Hello. So I'm Lainie, and I'm a composer, and I also run a music community center. So I feel like there's kind of two community. Well, it is the same community by default, but there's the community of people that like Lainie's music, and then there's the community of people that make up Exapno, my music community center. So the community of people who like Lainie's music is the people Lainie has met. I don't know of a lot of abstract people out there who I've never met who are passionate about my music. Maybe they're there and I don't know about them. But I just try to, I like being in this community myself, so I go to a lot of concerts and I try to get my music in venues that are very different and played by performers in very different worlds. And so I guess I grow the Lainie music community just by getting out there myself. And then the Exapno music community, it's really gotten to a level, it's now 2 years old. And I think even more than any internet push I do or any social media stuff I do, it's now word of mouth. I get, 1 or 2 emails a week, which is pretty good, asking about membership, asking about the way the center works. And I don't know these people at all, and often it's not even clear to me how these people found me. It's so far removed. It's the friend of the person who came to the concert that told them about. So it's gotten to a big enough level that I can't even control the way it's growing anymore. It's growing in a passive way. But originally it was all about social media and web presence.
My name is Casey, and I'm an interactive game designer or experience designer. And I think I've got a similar sort of answer to Lainie, which is that there's 2 communities. I try to design games that facilitate the building of communities, so getting people who don't know each other to have deeper and more meaningful conversations through a game is one of the things that I try to do with my work. And I think the other community that I would think of is who I work with, which I try to work with everyone that I like, and if I think they're interesting, I will try to figure out a way to work with them because I really like people. And that has been a good way for me to find collaborators that I work well with. Because if you're basing it off of friendship, then you can make interesting things. There's a trust that you get from that. So.
My name is Deneuville. I run a blog that is quickly turning into a web magazine that is called Care If You Listen. We talk about new classical music, arts and technology. I'm also a composer, but my audience for my music is very small. It's my wife and my parents. So I'm going to talk about the community for the website itself. The way that I have to create this community is, of course, using social media, but also creating a nice team of contributors that will mirror the interests of the audience. So far I've got 28 people that contribute to the blog in the US, the UK, and in the Netherlands. So I feel that their reach and varied interest brings a lot of value to the content itself, and people can see themselves in this content, and the equation works really well, basically. So the variety of the content appeals to a variety of people, and the community builds itself around those common interests. Of course, social media is very, very important. There is no nexus, there is no physical space right here if you listen. So everything happens online. So social media is very important. I just said everything happens online, and it's true and it's not at the same time. I try to produce a video series So I personally go and meet people, compose with ensembles, I go to different spaces, rehearsals, etc. And I just talk to people, I hang out with them and ask them questions. And so that's a little bit of physicality that I bring into the website, into the community. But overall, it's through Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, of course, Pinterest. Although I make fun of Pinterest, which is not very nice. But that's where I post all the memes that I create. So, but still, it's mainly social media.
I'm Rachel. I have kind of 3 hats on. It's great that you just started with physical versus online community, because I'm a little obsessed with that. I was the director of public programs at Housingworks Bookstore Cafe, where I was running 200 events a year, like from poetry readings to Bjork concerts. So it was a physical space, and we wanted people to come into it and meet one another. But then we also wanted to extend that community online for the people who weren't in New York. And so the sort of whole vibe of that community changed when it went from being like a local dusty used bookstore to a national online presence. I also did the 6-word memoir books, which was a series of anthologies with about 800 contributors to each book. And what I did when I got that very teeny weeny book deal was make the publisher promise that in addition to the teeny weeny amount of money, we needed 800 extra copies because every person in the book should be treated like an author. And so everyone got a copy of the book and a congratulations packet, and here's how you throw yourself a book party, and here's how you get yourself on the local radio, and all that kind of stuff. I'm 100% convinced that that's the only reason the book was a New York Times bestseller. I don't think the national media had anything to do with it. I really don't. And now I work at Tumblr. So my community management is my day job, basically. I work 50 hours a week on community management. And there's the overall Tumblr community, which is 73 million people, which you can't really do anything with. And so we have a lot of sub-communities, and I mostly focus on the literary community, writers and publishers and nonprofits and the Poetry Society and all these kinds of people. And so I manage sort of a pretty redheaded stepchild of a sub-community within a very, very large community. So I didn't answer the question at all, but I do a lot of things in different ways, I guess.
Great. And I realized that I didn't introduce myself, so I'll just do that quickly. My name is Jennifer Edwards. I'm moderating the panel. My background is I'm a writer, a choreographer, and a consultant. And part of my job is often posing questions in such a way that they lead to kind of a core issue. And so I hope that this next question will tap that in some way. And it might seem obvious, but I think we skim over things that seem obvious a lot and they hold a lot of wisdom. So I'd like to pose, why is community valuable? Why do we care about community? Why do we care about building community? Why is it valuable?
Because that's what life is about.
Because we're humans.
Exactly. If you don't have community, then, this is awful. Then what are you living for? I mean,
suddenly the conference takes a turn for the worse.
Okay. When I first moved to New York, I feel like there was a year or so when I did not have a community. I took a full-time job teaching. I was really exhausted from it. None of my close friends moved to New York. And it took me a while to realize that I was miserable because I didn't have a community. And so I, even though I was exhausted, I would go, okay, it's 7 o'clock and I just got home and there's an 8 o'clock concert, but damn it, I'm gonna be even more exhausted because I will feel better if I can go out and I can meet the people who are passionate about the thing that they're doing, maybe probably like me, not as their day job. But I can tap into the energy that they have for what they're doing, and it's going to make me more passionate about what I'm doing. So I think, if nothing else, just to get you charged for what you're doing, communities.
Absolutely. And from my perspective, I don't know very much about composing or choreography or whatever, but they strike me as even a little more social than I deal mostly with writers who sit in a room by themselves for 10 hours a day, and readers who that is an inherently non-social activity, and so I'm really interested in the ways that we use those very, very isolating activities to draw connections between us. And in a less existential way, just to be practical, right? I think that kind of the first thing that happened with social media was you could talk back to your favorite artists and they could maybe hear you, and you had these lines of back and forth communication. But when it goes from back and forth communication to a community, to me that's when like, it's not even a matter of I can talk to my favorite composer, it's a matter of I can talk to other people who also like that favorite composer, and in a way it's less work for the composer, right? Like you're not building like 100 one-on-one relationships. When you build enough of a community, it self-perpetuates even when you're sleeping, metaphorically or actually. Yeah.
I have to say something.
Or else.
I do have to say something. I don't know, I mean, I feel that there are so many aspects of our lives that tend to separate from each other, basically. That, building communities is just a natural reflex, basically. It's probably easier for us who are involved in music because it's all about getting together, in a specific spot to listen to the same music or whatever. But also to be very pragmatic and, artists need communities for support. And so it's natural for an artist to try to gather people that kind of like what they're doing to try to make a living out of it. So yeah, to be a little bit less philosophical, but it's also financially that's interesting for everybody. So.
It strikes me that there are two ways to approach the idea of community that even just surfaced right now. So you have community that are a community of artists, right? That help to grow and shape your work, people that you can knock ideas around with. They're your community. But then there's your community that you're building that's more of a fan base that lives as a community at this point in time because they're connected to one another, whereas perhaps at one point in time fans were a little more separated. But I'm wondering, what is the value now of that larger community, which we could call fans or audience or whatever it is, but now because of technology, because of social media, because of the way we're connected now, they are somehow your community as well. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the value of and your participation in that community.
What do you mean by value? What aspect of value are you?
To you as an artist, why are they valuable?
I mean, one thing that I've noticed as a literary fan, right, is it used to be that it would take 5 years for someone to write a book, and when the book came out, then that's the first time that I would get anything new from that writer. And they might hear my reaction to the book when it was done, but I wouldn't be any part of the creative process. Now, some people are really resistant to the idea that fans are part of the creative process, but just the fact that there's any conversation going on when it's not a book launch, an album launch, a performance, I think has to change the tenor of the work, but you tell me.
I mean, I think we're also witnessing something like this with 50 Shades of Grey. Wasn't 50 Shades of Grey enough shoot of
It was fan fiction.
It was fan fiction, basically,
Yeah.
so something that emerged from the community and became something on its own. I'm not talking about literary value or anything, I didn't read anything, but just that's a phenomenon that we've seen in the past years.
Sure, and it was also a self-publishing success that became a mainstream publisher success, and that's a whole other thing, I think. But, I mean, just, I guess an example of that, right, is like Robin Sloan, who's a writer that I love, kickstarted a book, and it was like totally self-published and paid for by the fans, and this month he has a book out from FSG, which is one of the most prestigious mainstream publishers there is, and he wrote a blog post about it called Penumbra Has a Posse, saying what Kevin always says about people being more important than the money. I think you should Google it, it's amazing. But anyway, just that idea that like, without that community in the first place, would he have ever gotten to that sort of traditional success? I mean, I don't think so.
What social media might have brought also is embodying this community. I think that when you log into Facebook and you look at your page, you can see insights, you can see numbers. Of course, we're all on the numbers, but at least you can have kind of an impression of your following. And I wonder how easy it was before that to kind of like grasp the extent of your following, basically. So, and granted that not everything that you read on Facebook in terms of insights and demographics and everything is true, but still, when you're, I think, trying to put something out there, it's an extra motivation to know that something is growing, whatever it is, and you can kind of quantify it in a way. I think that's a big plus that came from social media in terms of valuing your community.
Just really quick, talking about community as fan base, it strikes me that I think in sort of the traditional way you're talking about, I don't expect ever to have a fan base. Okay, that's not fair. But I mean, I write nerdy music, and in this tiny community in this elite city. I mean, the idea that someone even in Baltimore would write me and get excited about my music is huge. And I don't define success or even have an expectation of building a fan base, I think. And maybe that's sad, but I don't view it as sad. I view like the community is really like the collaborators and the musicians in this tiny world that I live in. Them coming to my concerts or reacting to my music, or yeah, just the people who I already know in this community reacting to it. But somehow building a fan base. Maybe it's my super academic upbringing, but I've never even thought about it as an artist as something I need to do. Especially, I can say that because I've never even thought that I could try to depend on my work for income. So, leaving that aside, then I can really focus on making the art that I want to make, and the fans that I'm caring about are the people who I already know in the community. I guess it's very different running an arts organization where I really need a community of people who are very supportive of that organization.
But don't you think that there are nerdy musicians who would say the exact same thing? I never thought anybody would care about my work. It's so nerdy and it's so niche and whatever, and now they have huge fan bases? Sorry, go.
I'm gonna jump in here.
Yeah.
Okay, two things. One, you have a fan base. You've got friends of friends of friends who are emailing you twice a week to say, hey, can I be a part of Exapno?
Well, that's true.
And I realize that's not, thousands of people, but isn't that what you're talking about with a fan base? This isn't this, sure, it's still this tiny little thing, but that's what's kind of amazing about the internet, is that suddenly you realize that there's so many more people like you than you thought there were.
That's true.
And so just, I worked for a couple of games companies in London while I was living there, and by the time I left, there was one of the companies was selling out games in 45 minutes, and these are live games events that people would come to, and I have no idea who those people were, but they were great, and so I guess that's a fan base. And it was really exciting, and this is a completely off-topic thing, but it got to the point where we were selling out games in 45 minutes, so we needed to do more games, but we hit, what's the word? The limited, we had limited time and limited people. We couldn't do more than that.
You're at capacity.
Yeah, exactly. But our fan base was, at that point, too big for us to handle. So that's another question.
Well, and that kind of brings us to another point that I wanted to address, and that is in the last panel, there was a lot of talk about kind of social resources and social capital. And what struck me as I was listening to that panel was that your own personal bandwidth to interact with your social capital, right, is limited. You have 24 hours and 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, etc. And there's one of you, or maybe you have robots and personal assistants if you're really lucky to pretend that they're you. But I'm wondering how, and I don't mean this in like a work-life balance way, but like how do you handle that? How do you build a community and not be afraid of what that community might then do to you?
So one thing that I think about that I guess sort of ties into the last part of this and also the next part is like, there are some things that are one-to-one and some things that are 1 to 1,000 or 1 million, right? So like, even like I spend all day explaining to people what Tumblr is, right? And on Facebook, you have the same number of friends who have you as a friend, right? It's like direct connections. And on Twitter or Tumblr, there's one of me and I could have 1 million followers if I were Neil Gaiman instead of myself. And so that's fan interaction, but it means that one tweet goes to that many people. And I was thinking that too when you're talking about concerts, right? Like if you really only have a community of 20 people and you're all musicians, and so what person puts on a concert with another 19 people watching and you have to go to all 20 concerts, like there's something of a broadcast medium involved here, right? Where there are more people consuming the art than creating it. And so I think that in terms of like social media or one-on-one interaction or anything, if you can find ways to amplify the reach of the amount of effort you're putting in, then that's going to save you a lot of emotional energy. When you go on your Tumblr and you write a post about your, really personal life and like some letter that a fan sent you and a song you're working on that's not finished, like that's a very personal interaction, but you can still be having it with 1,000 people at once. Does that make sense?
It's sort of like passive income, but passive
Fan base.
And then what happens when those 1,000 people get back to you?
Right.
Right. I mean,
I don't have that issue.
but some people do. I mean, I keep thinking this might be like such a weird niche thing. Do you guys know John Green and Hank Green and Nerd Fighters and this whole thing? I won't get too much into it, but one's a writer, one's a musician. They're brothers. They make YouTube videos, and they have like millions and millions of fans, but no one over 18 has ever heard of them. And it's fascinating to watch them like manage millions of teenagers who feel like they're best friends without getting their whole lives sucked away. And I think that and John has, 1.5 million Twitter followers, and he responds to people who @message him, but not everyone. But you respond to like a big enough percentage in a visible enough way that people feel the sense of possibility. Like, I'm not going to reblog every single piece of fan art you make about my work. This is not me being mean, because there is fan art about my anything. But if you do it often enough, when something's awesome enough, then people are going to aspire for that connection.
Sorry, I just want to say I have made fan art about yours. I made a game that was based off of 6-word. Oh my god! I'm just saying.
Oh my god, that's so cool. I got a 6-word memoir tattoo, which was like the greatest thing that ever happened to me in my entire life. Anyway, sorry, Bill.
I agree with what you just said. I mean, seeing that Salman Rushdie, for instance, answers on Twitter, keeps me motivated basically, and I keep on tweeting at him even though I don't get an answer, but I'm like, he does, he answers, so, and it's him, you can tell it's him, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep on tweeting at him. But anyway, but talking about, expanding this community and leveraging this power of this community, I think about this band. I think they're based in California. It's called L1011. If you've seen the documentary about Helvetica, the typeface, the entire music for the documentary was made by those guys. And I regularly get emails from them, and they actually have some kind of like street brigade. And if you're a really big fan of this band, you can just reach out to them and say, hey, for my small town, I just want to represent you guys. They will send you some materials, some nice swag and everything. You can go on the street, put the flyers, talk to people. You get some free tickets, you might go backstage with them when they come to your town or something, and they just basically multiply their influence city by city by real people that really love their music. So I think that's an interesting way to do it also. It's probably not new. I mean, it's probably been done, for many years. But the fact that this online community and real life community can reinforce itself, that's an interesting point, I think.
I think that brings up a great question, which is like, in a practical sense, how can you mobilize your community beyond just having one? Like, what can you get out of your fan base in a really lovely way? But what can you use them for? I mean, I think they want to be used sometimes. Does anyone have insights on that besides what you said?
Well, to put a positive spin on it,
Yeah,
now that I realize very negative comment that I didn't mean to be negative beforehand. So I guess what I meant was I really care about the people who care about my music, and I guess it's the idea that I don't think of, I need to get 1,000 people who care about my music, or 10,000 people. If there are 30 people who I respect and whose concerts I'm going to, and they come to my concerts and they care, getting their feedback is huge, and it's a huge part of the thing that I really love about doing this. So yeah, if I didn't have that kind of active feedback from fans, I don't think I'd be as good a composer as I am.
Right. I mean, that's a great answer, right? That's different. This is like a publicity thing you're talking about, and you're talking about like actual help with the art from the people.
And that arguably, if you have 1,000 fans who don't actively pursue interactions with you, even though in a certain sense it might be more satisfying, in some sense it's less satisfying because you don't get the, oh my god, the counterpoint in that third song was brilliant and I had no idea you wrote stuff like that, and that actually happened to me. And I had no idea anyone was going to be listening for my counterpoint, and this dude was. So yeah, but again, as my two separate hats, that's Lainie the artist hat. In the trying to create the music community center hat, the thing I really pitch to people is that people, I mean, I guess it's what I was saying about me, but people make better art in a community. I just think there are so few people who genuinely work better with no input. And there are people who will doggedly say, no, I work better in a tiny room with no internet, no phone, no light. I just need my mind and the space to work. There are those people, God bless them, I hope they do great stuff, but I think everyone else, even if they're not always working in it, having access, having cheap and reliable and supportive community behind them is just going to make them better at what they do, even if it doesn't end up mobilizing a career or being a source of income, just making them better at the thing that they're passionate about. I think that's a huge motivating factor in why I want to make it possible.
One thing that's kind of come across my plate a lot lately is, especially in working inside of organizations as a consultant, is the lack of knowing how to be a member of a community. This kind of, if any of you have read Bowling Alone, it's kind of that idea of, post-World War II, we had all of this community engagement. Everybody joined a bowling league or was part of the, Elks Club or whatever it was. People knew how, it was very, very natural for people to join a community. As per the title of the book, now people are bowling alone. They don't join a league. They don't really get it, or it's not part of the community or the culture anymore. So my question is, how do we engage individuals? How do we bring back even the idea of community?
I think it's happening to some extent, especially in New York City anyway. Like, I was just thinking in terms of the bowling thing, right? Like, everyone has a kickball league now. People are playing, like, co-ed ultimate frisbee with jello molds and, like, all this kind of stuff. Never mind, I'll just go there. But I think there is, like, something of a renaissance to that. And I think it's also, like, and I haven't read the book, but, like, people are getting married later. People are living with roommates later. Like, I think that there's a young urban community thing happening, and that's a lot of why, and again, I'm a bookstore events person, but if you look at the number of reading series, the number of concert series, the number of like nerd night and adult education and all these sort of let's come together in a room and learn something, I think they're having a renaissance here anyway. But I'm like a little obsessed too with the like suburbs versus city thing, because I grew up in New York and people are always saying, oh, it's so isolating. And I felt like I didn't have a backyard. Like if I was going to be outdoors at all, I was going to be around other kids. So like I find the city sort of like throws you together with people all the time, and I wonder, I just was on a panel a few days ago with a writer who lives in like country Midwest and like does not see any other writers face to face, and that's so foreign to me. So that wasn't an answer.
Well, and then thank goodness for the internet, right?
Well, right, you're right, that's where that goes, you're right. Totally, but I guess I believe in a combination of the two.
Yeah.
Like I use the internet to find people I then want to see in person, and I see people in person and then follow them on the internet to continue those conversations. And so I think that, I don't know, I think that balance is important. I think people who are like, oh God, it's so isolating, we never see faces, are people who like are too far in the internet-only direction sometimes. I don't know, I'm not a shy person either, so I think that that's, shut up. So, I don't know. In that book, is it specifically about like suburbs versus city, or just about America?
No. It talks. It's a social behavioral psychology look at why people are isolated now.
I mean, that's why I make games. Like that right there is why I do it. I don't like being isolated. I like being around other people. I like meeting new people pretty much all the time. And a way that I've found to do the things that I like is to build them and then try to get people to come to them. So that's what I do.
Can you talk more specifically? So let's get to the how. Like how do each of you get people to engage with you online or in person? How do we do that?
Well, for the games that I've made, it's been sort of a build it and then invite people. So build it and they will come sort of a thing. For the work that I was doing in London, we tended to, we did a lot of zombie games because, that's hip. And that worked really well because there was enough sort of zombies are awesome sort of thing that even though they're not my personal favorite thing, we got a lot of people in, and then once they're in, we could do other things like a heist game, or my personal favorite, a bunch of games about Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
Could you repeat that, please?
That's okay, but once you're in through the zombie games and you like the other games, you'll come to the Victorian Engineer games.
Totally. I think that's a really good point. I mean, when you're working on like a season of bookstore events, right? You start out with your Jonathan Franzen or whatever, and then people know that they like coming, and then you can get your small press poets. And I also think that some really small practical things, like when we had a meeting talking about this conference, immediately I was like, are people going to wear your name tags or no name tags? Are the chairs going to be movable or not movable? I mean, there's some of these really small things.
What is your venue going to be?
Yeah, I mean, it just makes a big difference in how people interact, or whether people interact. I like to force people to wear name tags. It's super nerdy, but it makes people way more likely to talk. I've done events with name tags that don't have your name, but they have what book you're reading, or what your subway line is, or your favorite website, or things like that. I think a lot of it is just like breaking the ice kind of stuff. There's a book called The Chairs Are Where the People Go.
That's what I was gonna.
Yep. Sorry, go, say it.
Do it.
That's it. Just that they're like, I mean, that's book essays, some are better than others, but the idea is that there are these really small things when you're organizing communities with people that will make a difference in how people interact. Right? This room is a little frigid, not gonna lie. You're on stage, you're in the audience, the chairs are fixed and there are more of them than people. Like, if we were all sitting in a circle right now, how would this conversation be different?
Right. One of my favorite things from that book, and I haven't read the whole thing, but God, everything in it is a gem, was the author commented, you know, most of the events you go to, people are standing close to the stage and there are chairs around the back of the room for the leavovers, but that's ridiculous because then the people sitting back there totally lose engagement and the people up front get tired and want to move back. Like, it's a terrible system. You should get a couple of chairs really close to where the action is and just let the people who are coming in later stand and shuffle in and, you know, move around back there. And I try to, you know, just at the events that happen at the Music Community Center, I try really hard to get the chairs as close as possible to the performers, and the engagement is really huge. I think even the difference between chairs being there and chairs being like 3 feet closer, it can be the difference between someone loving or not caring about a piece.
And do you serve booze or not really changes.
And do you serve booze? Definitely changes.
I just say if you're running a game, serve the booze afterwards.
Also, just about what you were saying, that people join things less. Just because I'm thinking about these issues lately for myself, but I wonder if it's a function of people working longer hours and of couples in general. Both people are working. Like, I think the time when the Elks and the bowling leagues and everything were really in their flower were maybe setups where there was a more segmented division of labor, so people could sort of segment slots in their life. Maybe this is wrong.
No, I think you're absolutely right.
On this, but you could segment a place in your life for community and a place in your life for social.
Yeah, and you could go out to the bowling league while your wife made dinner.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
now there's no, like, you know, arguably those structures, like, I know no couples where those structures are in place, or single people are just, I think, working. Again, maybe I'm wrong. The idea of work being your little segmented 9-to-5 thing, and then you're done, and then you have your community or you have your other interests. I think those models are so outdated that people have to be really dead. Like, I had to really decide, no, community, I'm going to make my life better through community, but it was hard, and I'm passionate about what I do, and arguably I define myself more by that thing that I was doing in that community than by my day job, but I still had to kind of like steel my resolve to keep participating in the community. So I would love there to be some kind of, you know, the economy gets better, or just some like pleasure from the sky lets us all engage in community more, because I think that would have a huge impact.
And I think that we're defining our communities more and more by interests and less by location. I mean, the Elks thing is so interesting to me because it just makes my skin crawl. Like, I just think it's like a bunch of white dudes in a room. Like, I mean, not that we're not, but, you know, I mean, I just think that, like, the idea that instead of being at the Elks and the bowling league and the whatever, we're at the bookstore event and the concert and the interactive game, and that we're subdividing our communities by not just who we know and who they know in the social circles of who's in our church or who's in our playgroup, but the people who are actually interested in what we're interested in. You know, I think in my own life, my closest friends these days are women in their 30s, unmarried, who work in the book world, and met on Twitter and Tumblr talking about the same kind of stuff. And like, now we have personal connections, but the interests came first. And I think that that's really different from when your friends were the people who lived on your block.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if the media itself, talking about online communities, if the media itself is not also skewing the idea of community. I bet we all follow or like maybe 100, 200, maybe more pages, so we get this feeling of belonging to a community, but it's completely fake in a way. I'm not sure that everybody interacts with every single page on a daily basis, you know what I mean? It's just maybe getting a post here and there, maybe hiding those or whatever. So, but in a way, what the system is telling us is that you're part of the community, and this is how community works. And people who didn't know church, the bowling club, or something like that, maybe that's their own idea of a community. So we're still dealing with old models, but the media itself is proposing something very, very different. So how are we adjusting to this? And talking about engagement, you know, in terms of social media, sometimes having like a person or two of feedback on a post is deemed like, wow, that went super viral, like 3% of people said something, oh my god, this is crazy. 3% really viral, but still, you know, these are the stats, so, but if you transpose this in real life, it's just insane, like three people show up out of 100, and that was viral? No.
Right, and I think also, I mean, I'm really a believer in this online community thing, like, unequivocally, but when you said that, it really made me think about, do you ever get really angry because someone will be like, join the community, tweet back at Katie Couric and tell her what you think. And it's like, it's not what it's about, guys, like, stop appropriating. But I think you're right, I think that, like, what?
We need new words.
Right, totally. Yeah. And like engagement, I want to kill myself every time I say engagement.
What about gamification?
I just don't even. But right, but that's what I'm saying is like if these words no longer mean the things that we're passionate about because there's now a community for like Mountain Dew, then like what words do we need and what things are still authentic to us? I mean, when you're talking about your like nonprofit like music center stuff, I think about like the nonprofits that I give money to and who makes me feel like I'm part of something. And it's such weird things, right? It's like I want to carry a WNYC tote bag because the other people who carry a WNYC tote bag are my kind of people. Or like I want to be a card-carrying member of Planned Parenthood. I want the damn card because being a card-carrying member of Planned Parenthood is something that makes me feel like me. And I'm a friend of the New York Public Library, and that makes me feel like me. And so, like, what are the things that these nonprofits are doing? They're really subtle things sometimes. I mean, I can't stop thinking about the tote bags. Like, it makes a difference somehow.
That's really true. When I see someone carrying a WNYC tote bag, I'm like, right on. You know? It's like, you're my guy.
And then if you see someone carrying a tote bag from like a really, really small, like a Kickstarter campaign or a tiny independent bookstore, then you like stop them off the street. I mean, I do. Right? I mean, so that kind of thing, it's like so subtle. Like, is it different if you send someone
But
a
it's
button
coding,
versus a
right?
sticker?
It's how you're presenting yourself to the world and how you're dressing and what you're carrying and all of that. This is who I am. Come talk to me in real life. I mean, all the subtle, yeah, whatever.
I mean, I started wearing glasses all the time instead of just half the time because I found that on days when I was wearing contacts and other people in glasses didn't know that I was a glasses person, that bothered me. I might be a lunatic, but there's something to them.
There totally is.
How do we telegraph to strangers what communities we're part of and want to be part of?
But and those are the communities that we're part of online as well, right?
Yeah.
So you've got everyone who reads The Hairpin is a friend of mine, right? So that's what I'm saying. And so there's like, how can we?
And the Hairpin has IRL meetups. In New York, maybe not in Des Moines, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what I just keep thinking about that too, because I feel like I'm speaking from a place of city privilege. You know what I mean?
Well, you are.
Yeah. But we don't have anyone here to tell us what it's like to, I don't know, have any of you been an artist in a rural place? Anybody?
I lived in Des Moines.
Oh, I just say that.
No, I mean, it's not
what I'm
entirely
talking about.
rural. But it's not a large city, so we're talking suburbs and stuff. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Can I ask her what that's like, or am I totally
Yeah,
off?
do it.
Right? I mean, what's it like to find other artistic people in a physical sense in a place that's not New York?
Well, I live in Baltimore now, so I'm still like, I am outside of the whole New York life in general, but I think that it's just greater stages of like Des Moines. I went to school in Sioux Falls, South Dakota of all places. I like, it's just bouncing around and getting these arts communities all over the place, and they're strong wherever you are. It's just different levels and what you can expect out of this. There's always people that are committed. but it's not the same kind of training where you are, it's not the same kind of resources, but they're still there. So I mean, I did so much community theater, the musical opportunities, because I'm a musician, were always there. So.
Well, something I think about a lot too is that the sizes of the communities make a difference. Like in New York, there's a lot of people who go to literary events, but there's also 100 literary events a night.
Right.
And if you go to certain towns and you do a literary event, every single reader in the city will come to that.
Right.
And so there's like a comprehensiveness of the community that I don't think we have.
There's a small town in Oregon that I'm afraid I do not remember the name of right now, but my cousins live there. And I think it's got a population of about 300 people. And then once you include the outskirts of this small town, it gets up to a couple thousand. They have 5 theater companies. Absolutely everyone is involved in their artistic life. And is it good by New York standards? Absolutely not. But is it the most fun thing to go to ever? Yeah, because everybody, they did the full Monty, and everyone in the audience knew exactly who was playing the parts. So the energy of the crowd was absolutely phenomenal and hilarious, because as soon as a new actor would come on stage, people would start cracking up, and it was beautiful. So if you're in a smaller community, sometimes if it's magical, it can be like that as well. Yeah, so.
Do you have any examples, can you think of any examples of people or organizations, entities that are really good at inspiring people either inside of their communities or to join people outside of their communities to join their communities?
For music, Bang on a Can.
Yeah.
Bang on a Can, you know, I love their music, but even if I hated their music, I have to credit them with most of my musical life in New York. Just they encourage everyone who loves them to love the people who love them. They have a summer program where they do that. They have so many public events that encourage you to talk to the audience members. So much of what they do is about dialogue within the group and with the people with whom they collaborate, and they're such a good model, and they're so inspiring for getting community energy into the art of the critic.
Others?
I'm totally biased, but I think that independent bookstores in general in New York, Housingworks, but also McNally Jackson and Word of Brooklyn, Community Bookstore in Park Slope. When you go to an event at an independent bookstore like that, like you don't just come and watch something, you like join up with your neighborhood. And I think that they have really incredible staffs of people who like want to know your name and what your favorite book is so they can remember for next time what book to recommend to you and all that kind of stuff. I love being part of the independent bookstore community. I just think it's like incredibly, like it's intellectual, but it's also like friendly and supportive, and you should all go.
Apart from Bang on a Can, I can't think of anything right now. Yeah, I think what they do on so many different levels, and I mean this year was the 25th marathon organized for free. It used to be 24 hours of music, now it's 12. It's still a lot. It's still very high quality. Composer in attendance here was featured this year. I think they're doing just a great stuff, and they're all very accessible, very friendly about it. You can just go and talk to them. They're doing a wonderful job, really wonderful job. Yeah.
Just for fun, I met my husband at Bang on a Can. He met his wife at Bang on a Can. So you should go there if you want to get
It's not the same.
We're not married.
This is actually something that I say a lot about bookstores, because people go, well, Amazon can get me everything cheaper and whatever, and like I first start out with like keeping your money in your local communities and blah 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 blah, and then eventually I'm like, but you're not going to get laid on Amazon. Many people are.
I will also say though, on the big event scale, because it's true, New York has so many millions of events that it's easy to kind of lose track of the oneness, whereas, maybe in a smaller town you'd feel more of the oneness of the community. Recently, I went to Einstein on the beach at BAM, and I mean, literally not everyone, but I felt like I knew everyone in the audience. I couldn't go to the bathroom without feeling like, hello, 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 hello. And I mean, that charged me up. I mean, I had so much more energy the next day for everything in my life because of that. And I love Einstein on the Beach, and I love that event. But the fact that I felt like my whole world, all my people, felt, even if, I mean, there were people who didn't like it, but they felt like this was an event. And that's something, I think it's easy in a, because a lot of us have sort of smaller projects going on, or even if they're big, they don't feel like, we're not generally, I think, the people in my world making the next big monumental work. It's easy to sort of lose the historic moment feelinginess of the community, but I feel like Einstein on the Beach was one, that Bang on a Can 25th reunion, 25th anniversary concert, having a couple of those touchstone major concerts where I really do see a huge percent of the community come together. I don't know, that gives me an energy that's even added on to the intimate 20-person event that I go to. And recently there was that book fair in Brooklyn, of course, the book festival. Holy crap, everyone was there.
Yeah.
Every bookstore, label, everything. Not label, what do you guys call it? Press.
Publisher. No, and what's interesting about that too, sorry, I'm running out of time, it's just that it's not really every publisher at Brooklyn Book Festival, it's mostly the smaller ones, the independent ones, the local ones, and it's not as much like Random House, which is a really nice change from something like Book Expo, which is like a trade show. And so there's a real feeling of community, I think, at Brooklyn Book Festival that you don't get even at other kind of like book world events, because it's much more like consumer facing. Like if you're just a person who likes books and you show up, like it doesn't matter that you don't know your Riverhead from your, I can't even think of another name, but and there were like kids and dogs and babies and like, and all these really famous writers just all like hurled in this plaza. Yeah, I love that stuff. Although, if you go on a year when it pours rain and they hold it anyway, it's a totally different vibe. Just to talk about like those little things that change. When you're freaking out trying to not get your entire inventory destroyed. Yeah. But this year was beautiful.
So let's open it up for questions. Any questions?
Can I ask them questions?
I know, yeah.
We'll just ask you questions. Go for it.
Oh, I don't know. I have one question, but that I was just thinking about in terms of, it's generally the participatory things that we say feel so good for community and the games and the like grab an instrument and play. And then at the same time, I think that can affect the quality of the work, right? Like if I were going to start like a small press that would publish any book that wanted to be published, that would be fabulous for community, but who would want to read the books? And so I think that's sort of an interesting question is like, how do you balance like this everybody into the pool thing that seems to be happening?
Like the curation of the community.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Or not necessarily the community, but the work. Like
Right.
how much do you invite the community into the work before the work changes in a bad way? Or how do you balance the desire to let everybody play with the desire to have like, yeah, a quality level? I mean, I think these are big questions in publishing right now, but I think they've got to be in every creative industry, right? Is like, it's so great that everybody can self-publish, except then how do you know what's good? And doesn't it take more than one person to make a book? Maybe you're talking about people sitting alone in a room, right? And this is a big question in publishing where Amazon goes, you're an author, you're the only one who deserves a profit from your work, besides us. And then you have authors going, but what about my editor and my cover designer and my, like all these people who made the work better? So, I don't know, I'm just interested in that balance, but I have no answers.
I don't know if this speaks.
Oh,
sorry. No.
I have a question, but it's not an answer to that. Or
do you have an answer to that?
Do you want to?
No, you know what? I'm sure it's good.
Actually, I wanted to ask you all how you feel about. I came in late, so I apologize if this is just covered before. How you feel about how size and community balance out? Because you are all talking about small communities, independent bookstores, etc. But you could also argue that one of the most vibrant and interesting communities I think that's out there right now is the community surrounding Apple, which is massive. And Rachel, you work for Tumblr, which is growing. How do you deal with that? What's the balance?
I talked about that a little at the beginning. I mean, I think that when you have 73 million users, like you're kidding yourself when you call them a community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they are in some sense, but there are a lot of different communities. And the way that we handle it at Tumblr is that everything's very verticalized, which is one of those words I can't say without doing this. but like I handle literary stuff, and Annie, who some of you met earlier, handles artists, and someone else handles politics, and someone else handles music. And so there's a sense that we each really know the players in our community, and we're not some like marketing bro being like, oh, you got a record? And so I think that helps. but it's still huge, and it still comes back to some of what I'm saying, which is like, if I wanna, I have a spotlight on writers on Tumblr, and I put like the 50 writers that I think everybody should see. Would it be better for community if I put 500 writers, or 1,000 writers, or everyone who says they're a writer, or does it then lose its utility? And so I think that I'm constantly trying to strike a balance between being inclusive and letting the best things shine.
Just now I'm thinking of labels, which is maybe going to be irrelevant soon anyway, but on record labels, I find the ones I'm most drawn to are either the hyper-specialized, where we're interested in collaborative electronic music that simulates old analog sound. I mean, something ridiculously specialized, or I'm interested in something like Deneuville, which is kind of like a label that gives, I don't know how to explain it, a label that gives people the trappings of a label, but in essence invites you to self-publish your own music. So I like the democracy of that one, and there are great CDs on Deneuville, but I also think there is really a place for hyper-curation. I don't think communities, in order to be legitimate and good and helpful, have to be open to absolutely everybody to exist. I think a little curation is okay sometimes.
Well, there's part of feeling like a club as
Yeah.
well, and again, that's going back to Bex, is you know what I'm talking about. So we are part of this smaller thing. We are special in this way.
Right, and if you see somebody wearing like an NPR t-shirt, you kind of feel like you know them, but if you see someone wearing a hairpin t-shirt, you really feel like you know them.
Yeah.
Right, so like maybe the smaller the community, the more like intensity
Clubhouse.
of belonging. Yeah, but I'm resistant to that only because I feel like sometimes I'll see someone be like, these bookstore event kids, the lit kids are so insular and I'm not cool and I can't go and like I don't know where they even, and I always send them like a message and I'm like, please come, like these events are always free, they're always open to the public, like that's what name tags are for. So like, I love name tags, but so I'm like, I guess I'm resistant to the clubby thing, and it's true for sure, and I think that's like, how can you be like, this is a small interest group and we're all kind of down with the same thing, but if you like it too, you're welcome, yeah.
And that brings up the question of how do we break down assumptions about any community?
So a thing that I'm working on now with the music, so this has nothing to do with me as an artist, but just as building this community center, people keep asking me, well, can just anyone join? Can just anyone join? And I want to be really inclusive, but the honest answer is no, not just anyone can join. I've only gotten one or two queries like this, but if someone goes, I've got this really awesome band and we need rehearsal space, can I join? My first question is, well, are you interested in collaborating with other people here? Are you interested in, working with a composer or having a new, musician in your band or something? Or are you kind of just, you have your thing and you just need a room in which to do your thing? And if the person's honest and goes, no, we just need a room to do our thing, then I go, okay, then this is not for you. If you don't want to be, this is, I guess, very specific to what I'm doing, but if you don't want to be a part of this thing because you're interested in community, then you don't get to use the resources of the community.
What if you're interested for the right reasons, but you're just really untalented?
No,
I'm serious, that's the question.
Now, this is the fun thing about music. There are members, so currently I am so lucky. I think all of the members are beautiful. But there are, members who, are chatty and whatever, and talk about other members in front of me and go, God, I can't stand what God, I was here for that rehearsal, it was horrible. But the fun thing is it's subjective enough that, maybe some other member's going to go, that's awesome. And, that same person that got complained about will now have a new collaborator because someone else in the community will think, wow, that's really great. So I guess...
No, that's not really a fair answer, I feel like. Because this is just a matter of taste. But you're obviously saying there's just this, a charlatan coming and just saying, hey, you want to propose, it's just obviously not the right person. Right? That's your question, right?
Yeah, I just think it's hard.
You mean
That's all I'm
someone
saying, is like,
who
if it's the same idea, right? If I wanted to start like a collaborative book festival, and I want to give everybody a reading, but your poetry's horrible and no one wants to hear it, like that's a challenge.
But who's, is there anyone that everyone can agree is horrible?
Yeah.
Okay, my answer to that is probably that person's gonna hopefully, and so far for me, has self-selected out.
Maybe writing is different. There are aggressively bad writers. I mean, it's true, and they're usually the pushiest. The people who, generally good writers doubt themselves and want help and whatever, and people who come in and are like, here's my self-published book, it's perfect and amazing, it's going to change your life, and if you don't give me a 500-person reading, then you're a moron. Like, I'm talking about those kind of challenges.
But why don't you let the community regulate itself?
Yeah.
If you just let people, all right, we have these readings, everybody can submit, and then we're going to have a short list of people that you will select that will be featured in the series. Just let the community choose for itself. That's also, I think, a point.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And a lot of online communities work that way, right? With
Yeah.
like upvoting and downvoting and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, music is different, of course, because we have always musicians looking for composers and composers looking for musicians. It's like a love market, basically. So if you're really bad composers, no one is looking for you, and vice versa. So there's already this thing.
Unless you have money.
What?
Yeah, but I was going to say there's so many factors that go into that. Like, I mean, I don't know if anyone was at my talk this morning, but I think the school that you went to, because most musicians have gone to school, the school that you went to is going to have a huge impact on who's going to want to work with you. You know, it's my personal taste, but I think there are composers who are fabulous with whom no one wants to work because they went to a school that doesn't have as big a reputation as the person they do want to work with, because that person's going to have all the opportunities and get the performances in the big venues because they went to a big school. So you got to be, I don't know, I think you have to be really careful about making those kinds of assumptions. I don't know.
How can we break that? How can we break that idea? I think that idea is actually not, personally, and maybe if you disagree, then please tell me, but I don't think the idea that if you go to a better school, you should get more connections is a good model upon which to base an arts community.
That's what Exapno's for.
I know,
That's
which is
exactly
wonderful.
what
Which is wonderful, but like,
exactly
I would love to hear your thoughts on that idea.
That's pretty
how do you
much
deal with that in the
exactly
community?
why I wanted to start it. I mean, I wanted a community in which to work, and I didn't want to see friends who I thought were, you know, frankly more talented than myself not get the opportunities I was getting because they went to not as amazing schools as I mean, by someone's definition of amazing.
Wait, but you still have people that went to good schools.
Yeah,
so
we have
it's like
tons.
that there isn't necessarily, I think that maybe the question is a little odd sometimes because in this case, you're still getting people that are already like curating like each level, you know, like the school says we think you're good, then the community says, well, those people thought you were good, so we're going to also think you're good. And then they're coming to Lainie because they found out about this and because the people around them, it's this continuing down the line of people keep thinking you're good, or here I'm going to send you this direction because you need more people in your community. Like,
Yeah, but one of the explicit goals is to try to take the Yale Mafia, the Yale Brooklyn Mafia that runs new music, and rub that energy on other composers.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're trying to do.
Right, which is not getting people lit. Right. I say this, I should be careful, since I guess I'm technically a name part of that mafia, and I do love them, and there are very many wonderful musicians working that mafia. It's not about like tearing that down, but it's about just giving tons more access, tons more opportunity and access. So, I mean, my dream, once Exapno has things like money, or just a budget, or just any resources. I already have actually a letter drafted to music schools, and I want to send it out to like 200 music schools internationally. And I want to just go, hey, I want you to know if you know your students are coming to New York City and they need a place to rehearse, or if they want to, you know, be able to put on a show without going broke, or if they want to plug into a network of musicians who might be interested in the things they're interested in. That's another part of the reason I don't want to curate the community. I don't want to go, maybe I will think what they're doing is terrible, but maybe there will be 10 people at Exapno who think what they're doing is great. So I for sure don't want to be curating. I'm a little leery even of having like group committee deciding. I'd much rather, exactly for this scenario, I'd much rather have a ton of people, some of whom maybe are immensely talented, some of whom are not talented. Because part of the goal of this is to just give so much more access to so much more people. And it's really not access to anything that hard. It's like a space in which to play the music that you already probably play. But in New York, as a musician, that is a hard enough resource to get, and you need enough kind of social capital to get it, that I really think it's important to have an organization that goes, here, we love you, we love that you're trying, we want to help you try as best we can.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but for the sake of the game, we are already 5 minutes over.
Oh,
That was
I
a
thought
great
we were
note.
ending.
I loved that note. Sorry.
I thought it was 4:45. So I guess we're done then. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Hey, so guys,